discuss gender and its terminologies, and also discuss diversity. We are going to move on to talking about gender-based leadership. How do people lead? Do men lead differently from women? Do women lead differently from men? And how do we incorporate all the things that we have learned today to help us take informed decisions in our communities and society? So at the end of this session, there will be a module assignment which I would explain as we move along. Now, leadership is also another topic that is widely defined. There are a variety of definitions that have been offered of leadership. But for the purposes of this particular session, I'm going to look at this definition by Stephen Pickleton from the Avon and Somerset. So various definitions have been given about leadership, but we are going to look at this particular definition of leadership that we have here. Leadership is about having a clear vision based on core values and beliefs. Leaders must have conviction, drive, commitment to empower others to work towards the achievement of their vision. They must not falter in the face of difficulties. They must have self-reliance to persevere with resilience and tenacity to withstand setbacks, disappointment, and failure, to lift and carry their people through disappointments to progress on towards success. These are the true strengths of leadership. This particular definition of leadership is very encompassing. It illustrates the attributes of a good leader. So a leader must have conviction, drive, commitment to empower others. So it means that you should be a follower where people can take the steps that you have taken and follow in that particular state. And you should be able to have self-reliance to persevere. And these are critical attributes that we need to take note of as a leader. Now, let's look at gender-based leadership. There are some specific attributes that have been designated as feminine or masculine. If you look at this figure here, or this picture here, we would say that men are rational and women are emotional. These are attributes that have been associated with a person being a male or female. So attributes such as cooperative, interpersonal, participatory, relationship-oriented are associated with female leadership. And so if someone is task-oriented, we say that a person is competitive, you are dominant, you are self-confident, yes, then that is an attribute of a male. But is this always the case? Now, it's important that we look at the roles, qualities, and characteristics of leaders. This is another reflection exercise I want us to do. In what ways do people lead? Generally, ask yourself, in what ways do people lead? What are some of the characteristics of a good leader? Are there leadership characteristics which are seen as positive in men but negative in women, and vice versa? Sometimes when a woman tends to be very firm in the decisions that they take, they come across as being autocratic leader. Meanwhile, a man would be firm in their decisions, and that would be taken as normal. So I want you to think of your experiences, maybe growing up in school, at your workplace, in your community or society. What are some of the leadership characteristics that you have seen in men as positive, but then when it is reflected in women, it is considered as negative? So go through these 3 exercises, and this will give you a very good sense of the roles, qualities, and characteristics of leaders. So now there are a variety of leadership styles, but we are going to look at the 3 basic leadership styles that we know. And the 3 leadership styles are depicted in this particular diagram that we have here. We have the autocratic leader, the laissez-faire leader, leadership style, and then the democratic leadership style. Now, if you look at how the illustration is made in this picture, the autocratic leader, or someone who exhibits an autocratic leadership style, would always command his followers that this is the way I want you to do. He gives instructions and he expects that you follow it. There's no room for deviation. So he gives the command and everyone is expected to follow through with it. Now we have the laissez-faire leader, where you put everything on the table and allow the people, you give your followers the responsibility to take the decision. So you would take a step back and allow them to do it. Now, in terms of democratic, you bring everything to the table and there is sort of a deliberation on which one to choose, whether X or Y. So we are going to go through this in detail. Now, as I said, the autocratic leader always directs and tells. So I tell you, this is what I want you to do, and I expect you that at the end of the day, this is done. No questions asked. So you provide specific instructions, and you closely supervise the task accomplishment. You want to make sure that whatever instruction that you have given to the people, they follow it. And these people who exhibit this autocratic leadership retains power and decision-making authority, and they do not even consult employees, or they are not even allowed to give in any inputs. They are expected to obey orders without even receiving any explanations. So, as you can see, this is what I expect you to do, and you follow through it. Okay. Now, we have the democratic leadership style. In this context, you see that the leader coaches and is also part of the decision making. So in democratic leadership, as you can see from this particular diagram, you see that all the cards are put on the table and the leader is involved. He facilitates, he supports the subordinates in their decision making. So they take ownership for every decision that they want to take. So he also delegates, and there's continual consultation. The leader also explains, solicits inputs, and as they move along, he or she supports whatever they are doing. And it's important to know that in the democratic leadership, the leader facilitates and subordinates effort toward task accomplishment and shares responsibility for decision making with them. Now, the third leadership style is laissez-faire. This is derived from the French language, which means let it be. And it's used to describe a leader who leaves his or her colleagues to get on with their work. So it feels like there's no close marking. It tells you what to do. It's a largely hands-off. You minimize the amount of direction and face time required. The leader turns over the responsibility of the decision-making to the subordinates who are expected to do this work. And a good thing about this particular leadership style is that the leader has confidence that the subordinates will make the decision that is best for a particular issue at stake. Now, as we have looked at these 3 leadership styles, autocratic, democratic, and laissez-faire leadership, think of these 3 leadership styles and look at these questions. Do women or men typically adopt one or other of these styles more often than men or women? So are we saying that women tend to be more autocratic or democratic? Or we say that women are more, or men are more democratic in terms of leading? What styles do women tend to adopt? There's that perception or the assumption that when women assume leadership roles, they become autocratic. Is that what the case is? What styles do men adopt? Is it more acceptable for a woman to use a particular style or styles? What would be the consequences if women were to adopt styles which are not considered appropriate for women, or vice versa? In this case, if men were also to adopt adopt styles which are not considered appropriate for men, what would be the consequence? So I want us to go through these reflection questions and think through your own leadership style. Perhaps some of us have been community leaders, some of us occupy maybe supervisory roles or managerial roles in our organizations, or whatever experience that you have had. Whether you have experienced or you have witnessed or you have read about, reflect on them as you work on these questions. Now, as we have talked about leadership, it's important to look at two women who have been very influential in the African context. The first person I would like to talk about is Farida Bedwe. Farida's case is very interesting and important because she is an embodiment of gender and diversity and leadership at the same time. Farida is a Ghanaian computer software engineer who has lived with cerebral palsy since she was a year old. And the interesting thing about her is that she defied all odds, became the co-founder and chief technical officer of a software company called Logicel. And in 2013, she was nominated and awarded in South Africa's CEO magazine as the most influential woman in business and government in Africa for the financial sector. And in fact, Farida has been our guest speaker in the yearly Gender and Diversity module. Now, the next person we would like to talk about is the Liberian president, whose picture we see here. I'm sure most of us have heard about her. She is President Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, and she is the world's first elected black female president and Africa's first elected female head of state. And I think as Africans, we should be proud of this particular achievement of these two wonderful women who signifies leadership roles in our continent. So based on these two examples that we have seen, I'm going to talk about our module assignment. This is an important activity that I expect all of us to work on. This particular assignment is very encompassing. In this last session, we are going to develop a plan for creating a gender equitable and diverse organization or society. So the first thing I want you to do is to think about a diversity or gender-related issue in your community or organization. What would you want to change? So it means that you have to cast your mind back to your community, to your organization. Maybe your own experiences growing up as a man, growing up as a woman, or growing up as a male, or growing up as a female, or maybe even in your organization, there may have been an issue that you think needs to be dealt with. Now, you need to, once you have thought of this issue, you need to describe what that present situation is. So give a vivid description of the issue that you have thought of, that is the gender or the diversity related issue. So the next step is that you need to think of what change you want to see. What is the desired situation that you want to see? And that has to be written in a form of a goal. Now, the next step is that you have to identify the conditions. That is, think of people, things, or conditions that will hinder or help you to move towards the desired goal that you have here. So in this context, you think of laws, you think of organizational structure, you think of rules, you think of procedures, you think of personal attitudes. Now, once you have gathered all that information, identify the specific actions you will need to embark on to ensure that the desired change will take place. This assignment is a bit involving, but you need to reflect on all the sessions that we have talked about, the gender issues we talked about, the diversity issues, and then the leadership issues, and bring them all under one umbrella. So the hint here is, in order to do this, you need to identify forces within your organization which could help or hinder the gender equity or diversity in your organization. And so it's not just your organization, but you think of your community, think of your society, and think of behaviors, practices, and policies that can help or hinder this particular goal that you have in mind. Now, these are your references. The SEDPA training manual is a very good manual. The diversity, if you want to read more about diversity, these are the references that are available. Now, I expect you to read especially the first reading, which is on concepts and definitions. It will give you a better understanding of gender and or the gender terminologies that we talk about. The diversity overview is also a critical one, and then the gender training manual. I hope this session has been very useful. Remember, gender is not just about women, it's about men, it's about women, it's about society, and how we can create a very gender sensitive and diversity sensitive community for us all to live in. Remember the definition that we gave about diversity. If you have knowledge about a particular group, you will tend to understand them. And once you understand them, it will help you to develop respect for them. And once you respect them, we'll all be able to live in harmony and promote growth in our society. I wish you all the best, and I hope that we'll all go back to our communities being youth who are gender and diversity sensitive. Thank you very much.